Roll call on Legislative Day number 15, Friday, March 4th. Anderson? Here. Baldwin? Here. Beitman? Here. Boner? Here. Bouchard? Here. Case? Present. Cooper? Here. Driscoll? Ellis? Present. French? Here. Murphy? Here. Baru? Here. Hicks? Hutchings? Here. James? Here. Kinski?
Here.
Cole?
Present.
Cost?
Here.
Landon?
Here.
McEwen? Nethercott? Here. Pappas?
Here.
Perkins?
Here.
Rothfuss?
Here.
Salzar?
Here.
Schuler? Scott?
Here.
Steinmetz?
Here.
Wasserberger? Hicks?
Here.
Got some more coming in.
Driscoll? Excuse, Mr. President?
Excused. Senator Hicks is back.
And McEwen, excused.
McEwen excused.
Okay.
All right.
26 present, 3 excused.
Thank you. Pastor Lebovich, please offer the prayer.
I wanted to thank you all again for the privilege of representing you before the Lord this week. Please join me in prayer together. Creator God, a few years ago, 4 statues were placed in this House of the People in Wyoming State Capitol: truth, justice, courage, and hope. And Lord, this week, as the honored representative of these men and women before you, I have pleaded with you that you would grant us these things. That, Lord, as we are humbled before you, we asked that you would guide us as the source of all truth. That as we ask for wisdom, that you, the God of all justice, would grant us wisdom and discernment in our path. That as we ask for unity, that you, the one unified true God, would give us the courage to stand unified together, not in blind assimilation, but in courageous agreement and love for one another. And yesterday we asked for hope. Hope forged in the fires of refinement through suffering, perseverance, and the shaping of our very character and selves. And now, Lord, as I stand here before you, again representing these men and women, just as they represent their people and their districts, I ask for one more thing: new life. You are the source of life itself. You called into the darkness and called something out of nothing. You breathed life into humanity and called out life from the dirt and clay. You removed the stone from the tomb and called out the resurrection of your Son. And now, Lord, I ask that you call out life in the men and women standing before me here today. Give us new life. Awaken the dawn, breathing the air, made new from the ashes behind us. Give these men and women life found only in you. Give our state life found only in you. Give our nation and our world and all humanity new life found only in you. And as we stand, a people renewed and resurrected before you, may we praise you for you alone. Lord, in the decisions left to be made this week and next, give this legislature truth from humility, justice found in wisdom, courage to pursue unity, hope produced from perseverance, but above all, give us life found only in you and in your Son. Thank you, God, for everything. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Senator Salazar, start us in the pledge, if you would, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Pastor, you want to wait just a moment? Sure. Come up here, folks. Give us just a moment to honor our pastor who's helped us out all week long. If you haven't noticed, he's put a lot of work into these prayers and details on your behalf. We want to thank him for that. And I told him that a little bit earlier this morning. So, Pastor, we're going to give you the Wyoming State coin, and somewhere you can put that up on the bookshelf. Remember your week with the Senate, and we really appreciate you, sir. Thank you.
President.
Reading correction approval of the journal. Reading clerk, please read the journal committee report.
Mr. President, your Journal Committee reports that the Journal of March 3, 2022 has been read and recommends it to be approved. Senator Kolb, Chairman.
Thank you. Any objections? Being none, report's adopted. Nurse of the day, Darcy Corrodin. Appreciate her being here. Darcy, come up. Let the Senate say hello to you. Well, from my vantage point, I see that we have a U.S. Senator in the state Senate. Yeah, they're everywhere. I see at least one. So, Cynthia Lummus, Senator Lummus, we're just going to do a little introduction here and give you a moment to speak. It's with great honor and privilege to welcome back Senator Cynthia Lummus to the Wyoming Legislature. Prior to being elected to the U.S. Senate, she served 8 years in the U.S. Congress. Get this, 14 years in the Wyoming Legislature and 8 years as the Wyoming State Treasurer. She's currently a member of the Environment and Public Works Committee, Commerce, Science and Transportation Committee, the Banking, Housing and Urban Development Committee. Please help me in welcoming home United States Senator Cynthia Lummus.
Mr. President, may I have the privilege of the floor?
Privilege granted.
Mr. President and senators, it's such an honor to be with you. It was an honor to serve in this House. I sat just in front of where Mr. Kinski's seat is, and Tom Kinnison sat behind me. And we rabble-roused. Hank Coe sat right across the aisle from me. We had this special gum that you could eat the wrapper. And so I used to try to hold up the gum to Hank and eat the wrapper while he was staring at me, so he would say, "What are you doing?" And but he was on to me, so he would just keep talking blithely as if nothing was going on. And it turns out the joke was on both of us. Barbara Cuban had put me up to doing the gum with the wrapper and told Hank, "Don't acknowledge her," so she had us both playing games with each other. My years in this legislature taught me how to legislate. I wish the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House legislated the way you do. Process matters. The Constitution matters. And in these disruptive times, nothing matters more to getting through the disruption than respecting the U.S. Constitution and the manner in which legislation is supposed to occur. Our nation is now $30 trillion in debt. We don't get to read the bills that spend money before they are adopted. Hence, I don't vote for very many of those. We are financing our debt with debt. All of that 30 trillion in debt is backed by US treasuries, which are debt instruments. So we've put ourselves in a position that is worrisome, which is one of the reasons I'm so involved in the Financial Innovation Caucus and the opportunity that Bitcoin presents as digital gold for underpinning the US dollar and keeping the US dollar the reserve currency of the world. Next week, I'll be introducing a comprehensive piece of legislation dealing with digital assets and how they are regulated. And the inspiration for all of that comes from you. It was this Wyoming legislature that first passed a series of laws to innovate in the digital asset space. I've been pushing hard on Chairman Powell at the Federal Reserve, Lael Brainerd, Esther George, and the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City to get your special purpose depository institutions, which have been chartered as a result of your law, master accounts at the Fed, and ABA bank routing numbers. It has been a year-long push. We're finally making some progress, but the challenge that you presented the nation is something that will benefit our nation for a long time to come. You are the pathfinders. You are the innovators that have made this all possible. So I want you to know how significant, truly significant, game-changing it is what you did. And I want to thank you for it. At the same time, I continue to work on issues like the Jim Bridger power plant. We still have a hold on a number of the appointees because the agency, once having approved the notion of the Jim Bridger Regional Haze Plan, changed course once the administration changed course. So we're working with them as well. And we're working on rural broadband issues and issues related to privacy. It is so significant, I believe, that in this disrupted world that we continue to protect the privacy of all Americans. When our Constitution puts us in a position where we have to go back and look at the language of the Constitution, because somewhere along the line, churches were not allowed to hold worship services in some places because free speech has been thwarted on social media platforms and in other venues, such as college campuses, because one group of people who take over government buildings are viewed as rioters and demonstrators and are not prosecuted, and another group are viewed as insurrectionists and are prosecuted to the nth degree of the law. We have to go back and look at things like equal protection, like freedom of speech, like freedom of the press, like our privacy, and recommit ourselves to the principles of our nation. You know, as we've looked at Ukraine, it's a big reminder of how committed people are to their freedom and what they'll do for their freedom. We have the blessing of being able to preserve our freedom and to work for it every day in this chamber so we don't have to fight for it the way that people on the streets of Kyiv are doing on this day. You're the protectors and defenders of our Constitution. You're the ones that are passing the laws that protect our rights, our freedoms, and our ability to innovate and grow. I just want you to know how thankful I am for you and for your work, how grateful I am that you protect this process, this institution, and this state. You're on the front lines of the place I love, and I want to thank you for it. I also want to thank you for the fabulous turnout at our dear friend Leland Christian's memorial service. He was a beloved friend to all of us, a very special person, someone that I'll continue to miss for a very long time, as will you. He was the quintessential Wyoming legislator, lawman, lawmaker, father, husband, and dear friend to all of us. I am grateful for Leland Christensen, much in the way that I'm grateful to all of you. God bless you all and your work. And again, thank you kindly for your service to our state and our nation. Mr. President, I yield back.
Thank you, United States Senator Cynthia Lummus. We appreciate her very much, taking time to visit the Senate during her trip home. Okay. I think we'll proceed at this point. Signing of enrolled acts. House Enrolled Act number 1, read it in.
House Enrolled Act Number 1, being original House Bill 9, an act relating to the Eastern Shoshone and Northern Arapaho tribes.
About to sign House Enrolled Act number 1, same being House Bill 9. $89. 9, we're sticking with 9. So signed. House Enrolled Act number 2, read it in.
House Enrolled Act Number 2, being original House Bill 21, an act relating to sales tax exemptions.
I'm about to read or sign House Enrolled Act number 2, the same being original House Bill 21. House Enrolled Act number 4, read it in.
House Enrolled Act Number 4, being original House Bill 37, an act relating to criminal history records.
I'm about to sign House Enrolled Act number 4, the same being House Bill 37. I've so signed. We're going to stop the signing process right now because we have an important visitor. Members of the Wyoming Senate, it's with great honor and privilege to welcome Senator John Barrasso back to the Wyoming Legislature. Prior to being elected to the U.S. Senate, he represented the people of Natrona County in the Wyoming State Senate from 2003 to 2007. He is the third-ranking member in the Senate Republican leadership as chairman of the Senate Republican Conference. Barrasso is the ranking member of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee and serves on the Senate Finance and Foreign Relations Committees. Please join me in welcoming home United States Senator John Barrasso.
It is really great to be back home with all of you. I came in Washington and said, how are things in Washington? And I gave my standard answer, it is always better in Wyoming, always. You know, I saw a bunch of you last Saturday at Leland services, and it just kind of reminds you that we are one big family. I mean, we disagree, we're a good family in that we fight when we can, but we stick together when we must. But it really does bring that together. And then driving home, in terms of how politics works in Wyoming, driving home back from the western part of the state to Casper, we stopped, as people generally do, in Fremont County in Shoshone, at the service station there. And there was a car parked, County 11 plates, and walk in, and there was Ann Simpson, Al's wife, standing at the cash register. And we had a nice visit, and then she said, John, could you go and check if Al is still in the men's room? That is a full-service senator. But it was terrific, because you stand around and other people come in and take selfies, and there was a hockey team from Gillette, and they came through, and we got pictures with them, and Al and Ann and Bobby and I stood around and visited, and that's what Wyoming politics is all about. Visiting with people, being available, coming home every weekend, as I do. But I love coming back here. I sat for 5 years in that desk right there, where Fred is, and this is where you learn your lessons about politics in Wyoming. It's real limited government, limited in size and scope and spending. It's what government does to people and the role of government in our lives and what it spends and what it does and what it takes. And takes not just in terms of money, but also time and freedoms. And every time they talked about money coming from Washington and strings being attached, Jerry Geis, who sat over there in that desk and at one time was president of the state senate, he said, remember, it's blackmail and it's bribery, and be really, really careful about the way you take money from Washington. I used to come here, I think the first time I started coming was as a doctor of the day, where a doctor would come, and I don't know, Fred, you're familiar with the process of the program, come as doctor of the day. This is in the early 80s, and I remember one of the lobbyists pointed to me, and he said, you see that guy over there, Charlie Scott? He said, he's never gonna leave. Truer words never spoken in this chamber. But it was, so through the years, I've always looked to this as the heightened experience of 5 years here. Now, as the president said, lead the Energy Committee on the Republican side. Wyoming is the energy state, the energy capital of the world. We have it all. We have the oil, the gas, the coal, the uranium. We have world-class wind, and we need it all. Energy is called the master resource for a reason. It powers our country, it powers our economy, it powers our military. And when I think about energy, I think in Wyoming, it's energy security, economic strength, and environmental stewardship. And nobody does it better than we do it here in terms of protecting our environment to make sure we have this wonderful state to pass on to the next generation. And the world demands affordable energy. And we have it here in America. There are people that don't want to let us get it out of the ground, and that's this administration. Well, we have it here in America. And Vladimir Putin uses energy as a weapon. And what's happening now in Ukraine, and you see it, a lot of that is funded by the energy jackpot and the financial jackpot that he's gotten because of this administration's war on American energy. And that's been going on since day number one when they declared war and took out the Keystone XL pipeline and said no more leases for oil and gas in the United States. It hit us on public lands, all of those things. I'm going to be on Neil Cavuto's show a little later today, and I was telling Jim Anderson this, and they emailed me, they said, we want to ask about what's the solution and the answer to the question of Russian oil. The answer to Russian oil is more American oil. This administration has taken us from being energy dominant to energy dependent. We just can't, the world can't afford that. They just can't. We need to use it all. We need the American. We are much better as a nation if we are selling our energy to our friends than having to buy it from our enemies. Can't get through the head of this administration. And as the Russian troops have been surrounding Ukraine last week, John Kerry, former Secretary of State, now the climate envoy, said that he hoped this would not distract, he said, from their climate agenda. That is a delusional obsession that is detached from reality. But that's where a lot of those people are. To me, reality is what's happening on the streets of Ukraine right now. Reality is the braveness of these courageous individuals who are absolutely defiant in the face of the Russians. That's what the reality is. They're an inspiration. We should not be dependent upon Russia for anything. And that includes uranium for our nuclear reactor. I'm a big supporter of what we're going to be doing here with advanced stages of nuclear reactors, but I've said from day one, and we're not going to power it with Russian power, period. And now I have bipartisan legislation that guarantees that in the Senate. So I continue to work on it. But we need it all. We have it in Wyoming. Through proper innovation and investment, Wyoming is going to continue to be the capital of energy for America long beyond the days when we're all here. That's the commitment that I have as the United States Senator for Wyoming. I'd like to just end by thanking all of you. You've been so kind with all your, about my wife Bobby, as she's going through some treatment now. You know, people know her. She's tough. She's a Bobcat from Thermopolis, University of Wyoming, worked for Craig Thomas, worked for Malcolm Wallop before that. She always reminds me she knows more about politics than I do, and she's right. She's courageous. I know, Fred, I was sitting in that desk when I got the call about 20 years ago that she had had breast cancer, which she successfully fought and defeated. And you know, she has such optimism and such great attitude and such great faith. And we feel your prayers. We're grateful for your prayers. And I'm grateful for you allowing me to address you today. So God bless you, and God bless Wyoming. God bless the United States of America. Thank you very much.
Senator Barrasso, thank you for coming back home to the Wyoming Senate. Thank you, Senator. Let's proceed now with the signing of enrolled acts. Just in honor of Senator Case, we'll do this. House Enrolled Act number 3, read it in.
House Enrolled Act Number 3, being original House Bill 30, an act relating to sales tax exemptions.
About to sign House Enrolled Act number 2, the same being House Bill 21. We got some clipped together here, so let's do this. Read in House Enrolled Act number 3.
House Enrolled Act Number 3, being original House Bill 30, an act relating to school finance.
There we go. About to sign House Enrolled Act number 3, same being House Bill 30, so signed. Okay. Had a couple clipped together here, folks, so we're going to have this read in again for the record. House Enrolled Act number 2.
House Enrolled Act Number 2, being original House Bill 21, an act relating to sales tax exemptions.
About to sign House Enrolled Act number 2, same being House Bill 21, so signed. Read in House Enrolled Act number 5.
House Enrolled Act Number 5, being original House Bill 46, an act relating to the Wyoming Economic Development Act.
About to sign House Enrolled Act number 5, same being House Bill 46. So signed. House Enrolled Act number 6.
House Enrolled Act Number 6, being original House Bill 59, an act relating to workers' compensation.
About to sign House Enrolled Act number 6, same being House Bill 59. So signed. House Enrolled Act number 7.
House Enrolled Act Number 7, being original House Bill 70, an act relating to digital identity.
About to sign House Enrolled Act number 7, the same being House Bill 70. So signed House Enrolled Act number 8.
House Enrolled Act Number 8, being original House Bill 86, an act relating to genetic data privacy.
About to sign House Enrolled Act number 8, the same being House Bill 86. So signed House Joint Resolution number 1. Read it in.
Enrolled Joint Resolution Number 1, being original House Joint Resolution 1, a joint resolution proposing to amend the Wyoming Constitution by amending the retirement age requirements for the Wyoming Supreme Court justices and district court judges.
About to sign House Joint Resolution number 1, same being House Joint Resolution 1. So signed. We have some concurrences. Senator Perkins. Yeah. Read in message number 192.
Message number 192, referencing Senate File Number 66, American Rescue Plan Act Recovery Funds Appropriation. Passed the House, ayes 41, noes 18, excused 1. House respectfully asks the Senate to concur by adopting amendments.
Senator Perkins. This is on Senate File 66, Message 192. Senator Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move message number 192, concurrence request to Senate File 66, American Rescue Plan Recovery Funds Appropriations, and ask the Senate to vote no. What our friends, when it left here, we had over $100 million left of ARPA funds that had not been expended. Our friends down the hall went and have spent all but maybe 10 or 15 million of those ARPA funds on a wide series of projects. And while this body may agree with some of those, I think it deserves Senate input. And for those reasons, I think we need to appoint a conference committee, take a close examination of this work and see what we agree with and what we don't, and see if we can work towards a rational and reasonable conclusion, recognizing that these monies don't all have to be spent this year. They don't have to be obligated until 2024 and not expended until 2026. And while there are certain things that we should move forward on right now, I don't know we should move on everything right now and come back in a year from now and think, boy, I wish we sure had some money we could use for this because we didn't see this a year ago. So with that, stand for questions, but that's my recommendation and ask you to join me. Thank you, Mr. President.
Any discussion on this? Any discussion? Motion is the Senate do not concur on Senate File 66. Chief Clerk, please call. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. The motion is that we do concur, and you've been asked to vote no, and I think it's important to phrase it that way.
Okay.
Otherwise, we'll get wrapped around the axle on how we vote. So,
Motion is that we do concur and vote no.
and vote no.
But I
Bingo.
thought he
Thank
was
you.
asking for a non-concurrence. You've heard it, vote no. Chief Clerk, call the roll.
Did I say it wrong? Did they say it?
Concurrence roll call vote, Senate File 66. Anderson? No. Baldwin? No. Beitman? No. Boner? No. Bouchard? No. Case? No. Cooper? No. Driscoll excused. Ellis? No. French? No. Furphy? No. I'm sorry, Guru? No. Hicks? No. Hutchings? No. James Conflict? Kinski?
No.
No. Cole?
He's online.
No. Cost? No. Landon? No. McEwen? No. Nethercott? No. Pappas? No. Perkins?
No.
No. Rothfuss? No. Salazar? No. Schuler? No. Scott? No. Steinmetz? No. Wasserberger? No. President Dockstetter? No. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 66, 28 no, 1 excused, 1 conflict.
By your vote, you have failed to concur with the House amendments on Senate File 66. Senator Perkins, are you ready on message number 193, Senate File 67?
Yes, Mr. President.
Please read it in.
Message number 193, referencing Senate File number 67, state-funded capital construction. Passed the House, ayes 44, noes 15, excused 1. Signed Wendy Harding, House Chief Clerk.
Senator Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move message 193, concurrence request to Senate File 67, state-funded capital construction, and again, ask the body to vote no. This one is really pretty close, but not quite there. The bill is the same. The only additions to the bill is that left this body was one that we probably would agree with, because we did that before. Just it took $250,000 and made it effective immediately to deal with some of the acoustics effects in the Capitol. And it's interesting, some days in here the acoustics seem better than others, but maybe it's just some days that my ears are better than others too. So that one. But the other one they did is as the folks down the hall, added an additional $5 million to a Veterans Museum in Cache, Wyoming, that has been a volleyball that has gone back and forth between these bodies for years. It's not just a $5 million project. The plans I've seen is probably somewhere between 10 to 15, maybe, or more. Who knows, given the current inflative prices of construction. That's the difference between the bills, and for those reasons, I think that we need to talk to them about this one-off. It's important to note that museum is not part of the state museum system. It's a one-off that stands by itself. It has wonderful artifacts. It has wonderful things that go on there, and it's an honor to the people who served in that airfield during World War II, and preserves a lot of that. But until there's a plan that comes out that does this thing has been an orphan out of the museum system for a long time. It's not in the museum system anymore. It's under the military department. They struggle with it. And until this plan comes up, I don't know I would spend this kind of money to start this project. So vote how you want to vote on that, but my recommendation is we would vote no. Thank you, Mr. President.
Discussion. Motion is that the Senate do concur on Senate File 67 and vote no. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Concurrence vote, Senate File 67, roll call. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? No. Beitman? No. Boner? No. Bouchard? No. Case? No. Cooper? No. Driscoll excused. Ellis? No. French? No. Furphy? No. Guru? No. Hicks? No. Hutchings? No. James? No. Kinski?
No.
No. Cole? No. Cost? No. Landon? No. McEwen? No. Nethercott? No. Pappas? No. Perkins?
No.
No. Rothfuss? No. Salazar? No. Schuler? No. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? No. Wasserberger? No. President Dockstetter? No. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 67, 2 aye, 27 no, 1 excused.
Thank you. By your vote, you have failed to concur with the House amendments on Senate File 67. Conferees will remain on both bills as appointed Perkins, Kinski, Hicks, Steinmetz, and Grew. This is on 67 and 66. Senate File 1 committee will remain as is. Can I just check with you really quick? Thank you for the clarification. Let's go over that again. Our conferees on Senate File 66, Perkins, Hicks, Kinski, Perkins Chair. On Senate File 67, Hicks, Steinmetz, Grew, Hicks Chair. Reports from standing committees.
March 3, 2022. Mr. President, your Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred House Joint Resolution 5, Permanent Mineral Trust Fund, Investments and Distributions, respectfully report same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Guru, Hicks, Perkins, and Steinmetz. No, Senator Kinski. Senator Perkins, Chairman. March 3, 2022, Mr. President, your Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred House Joint Resolution 6, Common School Account, Investments and Distributions, respectfully report same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Guru, Hicks, Perkins, and Steinmetz. No, Senator Kinski. Senator Perkins, Chairman. March 3, 2022, Mr. President, your Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 31, engrossed, Wyoming's Tomorrow Scholarship Program, respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass failed amended. Ayes, Senators Guru and Perkins. No, Senators Hicks, Kinski, and Steinmetz. Senator Perkins, Chairman. March 3, 2022, Mr. President, your Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 5, engrossed, Wild Horse and Burro Management, respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Guru, Hicks, Perkins, and Steinmetz. Excused, Senator Kinski. Senator Perkins, Chairman. March 3, 2022, Mr. President, your Committee Number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 2, engrossed, Disposition of Water Rights. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Boner, Bouchard, French, Cost, and Wasserberger. Senator Boner, Chairman. March 3, 2022, Mr. President, your Committee Number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 73, Omnibus Water Bill Planning. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Boner, Bouchard, French, Cost, and Wasserberger. Senator Boner, Chairman. March 3, 2022, Mr. President, your Committee Number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 136, Underground Water Contested Case Hearings. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Boner, Bouchard, French, Costa, and Wasserberger. Senator Boner, Chairman. March 3, 2022, Mr. President, your committee number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 137, engrossed. State Land Exchanges, public notice. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Boner, Bouchard, French, Costa. Noes, Senator Wasserberger. Senator Boner, Chairman.
Thank you. On an announcement regarding a change to the conferee appointments on Senate File 66, Kinski Chair, Hicks Garou. Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 73, Omnibus Water Bill Planning, has an appropriation asked that be referred to committee number 2.
Okay. Absent objection, House Bill 73, referred to committee number 2, Appropriations. Okay. Bills on second reading. House Bill 3, second reading of the Senate of the House Bill.
House Bill 3, engrossed, state land leases.
There is an amendment. Please read in the amendment.
House Bill 3, second reading amendment number 1 to engrossed copy, page 2, line 18 after.
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move second reading amendment number for the body's favorable consideration. Ladies and gentlemen, we come to you on second reading with a compromise on this bill. We discussed a little bit the balance between providing direction to the executive branch, in this case, the Board of Land Commissioners, and allowing them the flexibility they need to take these cases when it comes to leasing vacant lands on a case-by-case basis. This is a compromise between those varying positions and different parts of this building that basically says that the preference shall be given unless the board determines that the preference should not be given for good cause. So at least they have to put the reasons for not applying the preference in writing. This is a good middle ground that I think ensures the bill's success. I ask for you to vote aye, and we'll stand for any questions.
Discussion on the amendment. Discussion on the amendment. This is on second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 3. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The amendment is adopted. We are back on the bill. House Bill 3, no further discussion. House Bill 3, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 15, second reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 15, engrossed, political subdivision club liquor licenses.
House Bill 15, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 16, second reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 16, military assistance trust fund authorized uses.
No amendments. Senator Landon.
Mr. President, thank you, and my apologies to the body for not having a couple of questions answered yesterday. I wanted to do that for you. You might remember this is a bill, let me start by saying this was an interim topic for your Transportation Military Affairs Committee, Mr. President, to look at recruitment and retention in our Army National Guard. And so we began that effort looking at several different issues, receiving reports. One of the things that we thought we could accomplish and do for our National Guard members is to provide access to this kind of care through this trust fund that exists. This does exclude other members of the military, and that goes to the question of the chairman of appropriations. It does exclude those members, primarily because they have access to other things. This bill specifically targets our National Guard members to give them some help. One of the retention pieces was that when they have to report for guard duty on a weekend, they don't have the ability to get childcare. And we thought this might be a nice option for them. So that's the disparity in there. The existing statute includes reserve unit members in the other language. They have access, as I said, to other things. This just carves out our National Guard members to give them access to maybe make a request, which may or may not be granted, but it does give them access to this fund. I hope that clarifies and helps out. Thank you.
Thank you. This is discussion on House Bill 16. No further discussion. House Bill 16 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a 3rd time? Hearing no objection, is so ordered. House Bill 18, second reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 18, off-road recreational vehicle registration amendments.
House Bill 18 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a 3rd time? Hearing no objection.
Mr.
Oh,
President.
Senator Landon, about rolled right over you. Go ahead, sir.
Mr. President, we had a good conversation yesterday on this bill. I think we got the white caps off the water. Hopefully everyone could get their arms around the bill. Remember, this is specific to dirt bikes. Last year, they were able to go in and register, and we didn't have in place the requirement that they have to register every year. And so those 66 dirt bike riders who registered their vehicles last year will be grandfathered in, but from this point forward, this would just say, we want you to register every year. And that allows these dirt bikes to get wherever they need to go and to be legal doing it. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Further discussion on House Bill 18? House Bill 18 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a 3rd time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 54, second reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 54, State Parks Recreation Management Authority.
There is an amendment. There are amendments. Read in the first one.
House Bill 54, second reading amendment number 1, page 1, line 2, after.
Senator Driscoll.
Did we read the amendment in?
Yeah, we just read the amendment. We need you to move it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. I move second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 54. Folks, this bill's potentially, as I said yesterday, can be kind of a tough deal on the ag end of the world. And what this merely does is, if the state comes in, somebody nominates one of these to do it, to do the agreement, it says, before entering into a lease agreement under this paragraph, the department should notify any leasee of the state lands the board has leased, that the board has leased to the leasee for agricultural purposes, and that the department is seeking to lease for recreational purposes. The agricultural leasee shall have the right to match the lease terms proposed by the department, and may notify the board that it wishes to match the lease terms and lease the same state lands for recreational purposes. Any agricultural leasee entering into a leasing agreement for state lands for recreational purposes may develop and manage those leased state lands and shall comply with the rules promulgated by the board. This doesn't really do anything to the state lands, but it does make it where the agricultural leasee, which we have a long tradition in Wyoming, a lot of these leases have been in place over 100 years, and they've had a preferential right on those end of it. So now we're creating under this bill, we're creating a second 10-year term that's very similar to the ag lease, but it's a recreation one. And this merely gives the ag community a chance to match that. They can't not bend the rules. They still got to fall under the same rules as anyone else would, or the state lands do, parks. But this gives the ag ability to have that second adjoining lease that hooks into their ground that could potentially, it'll eliminate a lot of conflicts because it leaves them side by side and hooked together a lot closer. With that, I'd ask for your favorable consideration and stand for any questions.
Questions? This is on the amendment. Let's go to Senator Landon.
So, Mr. President, thank you. And I believe I support the amendment because the last thing we want to do is jeopardize, grazing leases here. I guess my question would be, is the purpose of this, let's just say a couple of our agencies come together on something and say this particular tract of land, we believe that we can sublease or double lease. Does this give the grazing rights lessee the opportunity to match that particular proposal so that there would be no other activity there? Is that kind of the idea here? Or, I'm just curious if that would allow the ag lessee to step up and pay more so that there is no other activity there, or what exactly is that situation? So thank you.
Senator Driscoll, let's wait. I think we got another one. Senator Scott.
Mr. President, as the Senate knows, I do hold, family business holds significant state land leases. I do not think I have a conflict on this particular amendment because frankly, Mr. President, I can't conceive of a circumstance where we would want to use this kind of preference. So, Mr. President, for that reason, I'm going to vote and probably vote for the amendment.
Any further discussion on the amendment? On the amendment, let's go back to Senator Driscoll. Whoop. Oh, Senator Guru, way over there. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm not against the amendment. Just, there were a lot of questions yesterday, Mr. President, about this bill, and sorry, I was out in the hall, just got back in. We talked to our friends at the Office of State Lands, talked to the folks at the Department of Parks, and, I think we can answer a lot of those questions. I think it needs to be remembered at who runs and who will be overseeing any of these projects at its final stage with the OSLI, and that's the top 5 state elected officials sitting as a land board. I think they too can consider and take into account a lot of the situations and questions. I don't think, and I know that the bringers of this bill and the supporters of this bill, I'm one of them, that we have no intention, and there are no intentions about interfering with anything that has to do with any agricultural uses that are going on in state lands right now. I think if you're to approve this amendment, I think it's fine. I personally don't think it's necessary, but I can understand the reticence and the concern of the agricultural community and would like to, and if this helps them, then so be it. You're going to see an amendment coming up in a moment that I think really gets to the heart of a lot of the questions, and I'll be talking about that one as it comes. So this one now, voted up, voted now, down, vote your conscience. I stand against. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've been reading this amendment several times, and I just don't think I fully understand. I understand the intent, but when you read the sentence, the agricultural lessee shall have the right to match the lease terms proposed by the department and may notify the board that it wishes to match the lease terms. So in the original example that I brought yesterday, you have a grazing lessee who manages or runs cattle in a particular parcel for 60 days a year. That's the term of that agricultural lease. The problem is that area is being recreated 365 days of the year. And so I'm trying to understand how this protects that interest. Are we asking that landowner then to match the state parks who are trying to improve the trails? I'm just trying to think of a scenario where that agricultural lessee will want to take on those duties that we're trying to find a way for state parks to be able to take on. So the more I read this, I understand the intent, but I just don't know that it's accomplishing what we're trying to do and ensuring that our agricultural lessees feel like their rights are protected. So maybe more discussion, but in light of that, I do think we have another amendment coming that will significantly limit this bill, and hopefully we'll look at favorably, but I just have a lot of questions about how this is worded.
Further discussion, let's go back to the Senator Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I violate rules, I'm talking about other amendments, we've been doing it. So I wasn't sure how our rules have always run. We usually don't talk about other amendments that are coming, but I will, because we've already done it. The one that's coming has a sunset in it. And so the bill becomes law and it sunsets out, and now we've got a bill. And regardless with the report, we now have statute that allows this to be done. And I'm looking out for the ag community. And so it's not just improving trails. If you read the bill, it says they sell permits on that and they programulate how they do it. And I'm a little murky on that, is are we going to limit access to some of these state grounds by selling a permit? And we're going to say, well, we're going to let 40 bikers on here, but not 100. We really haven't gone down there, and I'm not going to get into the details of that, but our public out there, if they become aware that we're about to issue a lease that limits public use of public grounds, I think there's an outcry. And I hesitate to talk about that because I'm not positive that's going to happen that way, but there'll be an outcry. But if they are limited, I can tell you for me, I live in one of the areas, as you all know, that has a chunk of state land that gets intensive recreational use. And the guys have figured out with me, they look me right in the eye and they say, you're a grazing leasee, and if you want to try to limit me riding my ATVs on my state ground, even though it's against the rules to go off the trail, we're going to file a complaint on your state lease, on your ag lease, because you're a grazing lease. No one's out there to patrol on mine. And by the way, we pick the garbage up. We pick up the stuff that's been shot. And we have new trails made almost all the time. And that's what I'm looking at. I want the right to meet the thing so I can be part of the enforcement if I'm doing it. I may pick it up and they say, we're going to issue 50 permits, or we're going to do it this way. I've still got to follow their rules, but I happen to know we got 1 million acres of state ground. We're not going to hire another 180 people for state parks to be out there patrol. What they're going to do is improve the trail, correct? And then they're going to walk away. And then what do? Call up, and I call down here to Cheyenne, and I say, hey, I got a bunch of guys out here running around on ATVs. They're like, well, we don't have any law enforcement, because guess what? That's what state lands tells you right now. When you're grazing leasee and you call, you know what they tell you? Call the sheriff's office. The sheriff's office said, well, it's state lands, we really don't enforce rules there. So what's really happened is some guy hates me because I hassled him and nobody did it. So this merely gives the ag community a chance to have a hand in how that's actually patrolled and done. They can't create new rules. It says they match, and that's the existing language, by the way. It seems kind of clunky. That's the existing language we have, is if the good senator from Casper comes in, he's my neighbor, and he bids on my state lease, and he bids twice what the going rate is, or 3 times. Our statute says I've got the right to just match that bid. I can't, I have the right to say I still want to keep it, but I'll pay them more money. And that's what this does. It gives you the opportunity to say, I want to be the one that does it. I think it's fair. Thank you.
All right, this is on the amendment. Second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 54. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Amendment's passed. Reading the second amendment, second reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 54.
House Bill 54, second reading amendment number 2, page 1, line 10, after.
Thank you. Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, I move second reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 54. I think we've already discussed the amendment, so just vote aye.
Well, we had some, Senator, we had some amendment wandering a moment ago, but step into yours now and explain it.
All right, Mr. Chairman. So I think we all heard the discussion yesterday. There's a lot of concerns with this. So what this does, Mr. Chairman, it allows the state parks and the Office of State Lands and Investment to go out and do 5 pilot projects around the state, because I think there's places that it's very applicable for the day. But it also requires both of those agencies, because of the Office of State Lands and Investments reports back to the Joint Ag Committee, and the State Parks reports back to the Travel, Recreation, and Wildlife Committee to monitor those projects for the next 4 years to see if they're working, see if there's issues that we didn't contemplate. And so it allows us to move forward. We have legislative oversight coming back to two different committees, one that's statutorily with the Ag, Public Lands, Public State and Water Resources and TRW. And in 4 years, if there's no problems, Mr. Chairman, it just becomes institutional and they can go ahead and move forward with it. That's all the amendment does, Mr. Chairman. I do want to make one point. I never want to confuse the fact that these are not public lands, Mr. Chairman. They are institutional lands. They're not public lands. They belong to the institutions, the school trust lands, the universities, our other healthcare facilities, the corrections department. And so we never want to let that premise out that they're public. They're institutional lands that belong to the state of Wyoming, and they have significantly different rules associated with those than they would, say, a state park or any of other lands. So just a clarification. But on and for the amendment. Stand for any questions.
Discussion on the amendment to Senator Grew.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I'd like to apologize to you and apologize to the body for my impertinent wandering a moment ago. I did not mean to, but on in favor of this amendment. I'd like to thank the good senator from Baggs for coming up with I think an elegant solution to this problem. The goal here is to prove that this can work, and I think this amendment goes to that. I think we can answer a lot of the questions about not going into areas where energy production is happening, not going into areas where agriculture production is going, if we could have these pilot projects. And I did support, I would support other amendments that further constrict this for now, because I really believe in this. I believe in this project. I believe that it can work, and just like the opportunity to pass it. So I thank the bringer of the amendment and urge you all to vote aye. Thank you.
All right, Senator Landon.
Mr. President, on and for the amendment, I wanted to tip my Stetson to the senator as well for the work he did down the hall and with the agencies. I think what intrigued me about this bill is that it looked at things a little bit differently. Knowing the impact that we have with our recreationalists that are coming and are already here and proliferating, and knowing the history that was pointed out by my friend over in the corner with respect to our agriculture industry, we've got to strike a little balance here, but I like the fact that those institutional lands, which are a little different, we have to be looking for ways to maybe generate better revenue off of those lands on behalf of our schools. And so I think there's some real potential here on and for the amendment and for the bill, obviously. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the amendment? We are on second reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 54. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The amendment is passed. Back on the bill. Oh, Senator Scott.
Mr. President, I think we have scratched the surface with this bill on a major problem that's developing as our society is changing, as the desires of the population for recreation on state lands are changing, and as frankly, the opportunities for some of the things we do on state lands are getting less elsewhere, and people are coming here to take advantage of our state lands. Mr. Chairman, I think this bill just scratches the surface of it. I think we need to take a careful look at this whole issue. There's 3 or 4 potential legislative committees here that could be involved, and you've got a balancing of the various uses we want to make of the state lands. Mr. Chairman, I thought maybe it'd be a good idea to transform this bill into a study bill.
Senator Scott, could I have you go right into your mic? And, well, the way we know that, the camera's not finding you. So
okay.
We want the camera to find you. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. I looked at trying to turn this into a study bill, Mr. Chairman, and I couldn't see how to do it adequately within the title of the bill. So I did want to advise the Senate that I don't see how we can do that to this bill. That's probably what it needs. So, Mr. President, two things I would urge those of you on Management Council. This is a time to start getting the committees looking at some of these issues during the interim. It's going to take us a while, I think, to sort all this out. And second, the question I have on the bill is this bill ready for prime time? Have we thought of the abuses that could be made of some of these leases? And I think particularly in the hunting area, there might be some. And is this bill really ready for prime time, even with the amendments we've put on it?
Senator Case?
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I echo those concerns. I was sort of hoping we could figure out how to make this a study bill. Mr. President, I worry about local communities that are, they're not part of the decision process of these leasing efforts. And my experience in my community with this, the Division of State Parks in their efforts to try to decide what to do with Sinks Canyon has been very negative. And they missed it. They just missed it. And so I'm very worried that without the community involvement and decisions about things like this, we have a couple of school sections that are used for recreation. And I'm not really enthused about this division deciding the fate of those sections without community involvement. And so far, Mr. President, they have missed it. So I'll be a no vote on this bill.
Further discussion on the bill? Further discussion? Ready for the question? Okay. House Bill 54, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 55, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 55 engrossed, liquor licenses, airport exemption, an act relating to alcoholic beverages.
House Bill 55, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 56, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 56 engrossed, examination of books of certain districts and entities.
House Bill 56, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 60, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 60 engrossed, fiscal training and enforcement of financial reporting laws.
House Bill 60, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 62, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 62, insurance amendments.
House Bill 62, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it's so ordered. House Bill 76, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 76 engrossed, single office real estate brokers licensing requirements.
House Bill 76, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the House bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it's so ordered. House Bill 81, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 81, operation of motorcycles, disabled persons.
House Bill 81, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objections, it is so ordered. House Bill 82, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 82, military discharge and benefits.
House Bill 82, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it's so ordered. House Bill 123, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 123 engrossed, mine reclamation, disposal of materials.
House Bill 123, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Bills on third reading and final passage. Bills on third reading, final passage. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, do you have a consent list?
Mr. President, we do have a consent list. I move the third reading consent list, which is as follows. House Bill 4, water permits, livestock on federal land. House Bill 7, commercial vehicle driving disqualification. House Bill 17, veterans facilities surrounded by grazing. House Bill 33, community health services, continued redesign efforts. House Bill 47, local impact assistance payments. House Bill 49, election reporting requirements. House Bill 52, timeline to prepare and process absentee ballots. House Bill 65, county tax protest filing date. House Bill 79, employment support fund amendments. House Bill 80, campaign reports amendments. House Bill 87, insurance investment amendments. House Bill 88, name change, notice publication of minors amendment. House Bill 108, funeral service practitioner amendments. House Bill 110, Board of Psychology, behavior analyst regulation. House Bill 125, workplace injury assistance, information and guidance.
Would anyone like any of these bills removed from the consent list? Senator Case.
House Bill 49, election reporting requirements.
Thank you. House Bill 49, election reporting requirements, has been removed from the consent list. Would anyone else like any bills removed from the consent list? Okay, with that, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall these bills pass the Senate? House Bill 4, House Bill 7, House Bill 17, House Bill 33, House Bill 47, House Bill 52, House Bill 65, House Bill 79, House Bill 80, House Bill 87, House Bill 88, House Bill 108, House Bill 110, and House Bill 125. Chief Clerk, call the roll.
Anderson, aye. Baldwin. Aye. Beitman. Boner. Bouchard. Case.
Aye.
Cooper. Driscoll. Ellis. French. Furphy. Guru. Hicks. Hutchings. James. Kinski. Kinski.
Aye.
Aye. Kolb. Aye. Cost. Aye. Landon. Aye. McEwen. Aye. Nethercott. Aye. Pappas. Aye. Perkins. Aye. Rothfuss. Aye. Salazar. Aye. Schuler. Aye. Scott. Aye. Steinmetz. Aye. Wasserberger. President Dockstader. On the consent list, 30 aye. House Bill 4, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 4, 30 aye. House Bill 7, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 7, 30 aye. House Bill 17, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 17, 30 aye. House Bill 33, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 33, 30 aye. House Bill 47, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 47, 30 aye. House Bill 52, are there any changes?
Case, aye to no.
Aye to no. Beitman, aye to no. Steinmetz? Aye to no. McEwen? Aye to no. Bouchard? Aye to no. James, aye to no. Kolb, aye to no. French? Aye to no. Dockstetter, no. Hutchings, aye to no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 52, 20 aye, 10 no. House Bill 65, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 65, 30 aye. House Bill 79, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Hutchings, aye to no. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 79, 29 aye, 1 no. House Bill 80, are there any changes? Beitman, aye to no. Rothfuss, aye to no. McEwen, aye to no. Case,
I don't know.
aye to no. Salazar, aye to no. James, aye to no. French, aye to no. Bouchard, aye to no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 80, 22 aye, 8 no. House Bill 87, are there any changes? Beitman, aye to no. Hutchings, aye to no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 87, 28 aye, 2 no. House Bill 88, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 88, 30 aye. House Bill 108, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 108, 30 aye. House Bill 110, are there any changes? Beitman? Beitman, no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 110, 29 aye, 1 no. House Bill 125, are there any changes? Beitman, no. Steinmetz, aye to no. French, Aye to no. Cole? Aye to no. McEwen? Aye to no. Bouchard? Aye to no. Salazar? Aye to no. James? James, no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 125, 22 aye, 8 no.
Having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, House Bill 4, House Bill 7, House Bill 17, House Bill 33, House Bill 47, House Bill 52, House Bill 65, House Bill 79, House Bill 80, House Bill 87, House Bill 88, House Bill 108, House Bill 110, House Bill 125 have passed the Senate. Bills on third reading. House bills on third reading. House Bill 42, read it in.
House Bill 42 engrossed, local government distribution, sponsored by the Appropriations Committee, an act relating to local government funding.
There is an amendment. Please read it in.
House Bill 42, third reading amendment number 1 to engrossed copy, page 1, line 4, after.
Senator Hicks.
Mr. President, I move third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 42 and would ask for your favorable consideration, members of the body. You know, we had a pretty extensive discussion about this bill just the other day as it came out of appropriations that had $105 million in there under our normal distribution formula. And then our colleagues put another $15 million in there from local consensus projects. We further amended that on the floor because that was going to be distributed on a strict population basis. So we amended that, Mr. Chairman, to say that would be distributed on the same formula that we use for everything else. But Mr. Chairman, I remember the discussion we have, and I think it was my colleague from up in the basin here on this, and I don't know if you still have this handout that showed all the distributions of the ARPA funding and the normal distributions of the 105. But the question come up is to, when we looked at the end of that, the very last column, it said, how come some of these have a minus on them? And what you see is when you go through there, this is our very smallest communities. These are for the federal distribution. So the federal, when they distributed the $175 million of ARPA, they did it straight on population. And so the largest populations areas got a significant amount of money versus the low populations. Well, in our formula, we recognize what we call a hardship. Sometimes when you live in a community of 200 or 300 or 150 people, and we've got these scattered all over the state of Wyoming. I would dare to say that there's hardly maybe one county in the whole state that doesn't have these little communities, Mr. Chairman. So based on that discussion, and then we've added the $15 million in there, what the amendment does, Mr. Chairman, is it goes in there and it takes that $15 million that was required for consensus. And remember, those consensus are strictly construction dollars, and you got to go out and get together with everybody and do that, which is not a bad idea normally. But Mr. Chairman, between the ARP bill and the infrastructure bill and what we've already got in there, we have infrastructure money for every community in the state to the tune of $600 to $700 million out there. So the infrastructure money is out there. So what the amendment does is it takes that $15 million that was dedicated to construction projects under a consensus formula, just moves it into a total. Now there's 120 for distributions. And what it does is if you go back to the table that you had, and it shows why were all those columns on the right. And if you look at those were all the little cities we have because of the federal government didn't get the same rate of distributions that we would do under our formula. So the other part of the amendment, Mr. Chairman, just goes in there and it doubles what we call the hardship formula. So it will boost those for those very smallest communities and those couple of counties out there, and then redistributes all the rest of that like we normally would with our normal distribution formula. Mr. Chairman, that's all the amendment does, and it all harkens back to our discussion and how the federal dollars were distributed. It's just trying to help the little guy out there just a little bit that didn't receive the benefit of all the federal monies like our bigger municipalities and counties. So stand for any questions.
Questions? Senator Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. Might be a losing battle to do this, but on and against the amendment. And, you know, the idea behind the 15 million to me is a good idea, and that is it incentivizes cooperation between local government districts. If you go out and look, there are problems that vex communities that go over and cross over boundaries, and yet because of the pressures of the current demands on those municipalities and those local government organizations and their budget pressures, it's really hard to get together and do some of those cooperative things together. This is an enticement that allows and encourages that type of cooperation to get together. It doesn't require unanimity. It just simply requires the organizations, the local governmental entities represent at least 70% of the population to get together and figure that out. I've got a little, just as an example, there's a little community. There are two little communities that are north of north of Casper, where I'm from, and they've had a water line out that goes out to one of those communities they've been trying to get fixed since I was on the commission, since I was a county commissioner. They've done everything they can to do that. We even tried to have a little special purpose tax election, what had lasted for 4 or 6 months, and that just recently failed in my community. Although it was only less than 800 people, I think less than 800 people showed up to vote for it. And so it helps get those types of things done. They don't have the wherewithal on their own, but if you can get and solve these problems together, you can have a lot of community operation. I can tell you from my experience as a commissioner, it enhances. If you will talk to your counterparts, if you will talk to municipalities, and municipalities will talk to commissioners, and you can get a lot done, and it only helps the people of the entire county if your leaders will talk. So for that reason, I mean, they can all use the money, that is true. But for that reason, I think it's an important investment in cooperation to get some of these vexing problems that you have in these districts and get them resolved. I mean, you can vote this one up or vote it down. Your communities will like it either way. But I think it's worth the investment in cooperation. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, we have two. I think Senator Cosspring got first up, but we'll come back to you, Senator Salazar. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I hope we do pass this amendment. In Bighorn County, 7 of 9 of our our towns get negative funding. So it's all right to have cooperation amongst the county and all, but if none of your municipalities are getting any money, it's pretty hard to do much at all. And so the idea of our small towns being able to get a little bit of an extra boost is really important to being able to do that cooperation and to work with those others. So I would hope that you would consider that and vote favorably for this amendment.
Senator Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. President. So first of all, I appreciate this amendment. You know, I'm one of those senators who represents small communities and in Fremont County, little cowboy town right before you head to the Teton County. But, you know, these small towns, they're at the end of the line and they are struggling. And I know that you good senators know they're struggling. This extra money is going to help our rural small towns who are struggling. And, you know, the big towns, the big cities in Wyoming, I'm very happy for them that they're getting this money. But I'll tell you, when I do my town hall meetings in those little small towns, one of the first things I hear is, when is Cheyenne going to help us? And this amendment helps those small towns. And I appreciate the bringer of the amendment. I hope you'll support it. Thank you.
Further discussion? We are on third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 42. Ready for the question. Question being called. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. No. Amendments passed. Division being called. All those in favor say stand.
President, I'm standing. I just look like I'm sitting down.
He was an aye. Yeah, aye on the screen. Yes, 19. All those opposed, stand. No, but I like to put you on camera. There we go. Yes, 19, no, 10. We've concluded, I ruled from the chair that he was standing. I ruled him standing. So the amendment has passed. That's third reading amendment number 1, House Bill 42. No more amendments. We're back on the bill. Any discussion on the bill? House Bill 42. House Bill 42. Having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, when you get a moment, call the roll.
Third reading roll call, House Bill 42. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Beitman? No. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? No. Case? Aye. Cooper? Aye. Driscoll? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? No. Furphy? Aye. Garou? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. James? No. Kinski?
Aye.
Aye. Kolb? Aye. Cost? Aye. Landon? Aye. McEwen? No. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Perkins? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. Wasserberger? Aye. President Dockstetter? Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 42, 25 aye, 5 no.
House Bill 42, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, House Bill 42 has passed the Senate. Oh, yeah, it's on. Yeah. Okay. Oh, sure. Senator Salazar, go ahead.
I don't know who this group is, but they have been watching us intently with incredible interest. And that in itself is
How about that?
recognition. If you would give them a good welcome.
Welcome to the Senate. Senator Hutchings, do you know who our visitors are?
No, Mr. Chairman, but I wanted to piggyback on that. Whoever they are, I appreciate their parents for bringing them here dressed so handsomely. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Welcome to the Senate.
Yeah.
Senator Bouchard?
Thank you, Mr. President. I think I just want to pile on there. I believe I recognize some of those faces. Those are the people from CPAC.
Okay, well, welcome to the Senate. Okay. Generally, send in a note, let us introduce you. There we go. Everybody ready to move forward? Okay. House Bill 49, read it in.
House Bill 49 engrossed, election reporting requirements, sponsored by the Corporations Committee, an act relating to elections.
House Bill 49 on third reading. Senator Case.
Mr. President, I would respectfully ask that we lay back House Bill 49 for one day.
Okay, without objection, House Bill 49 has been laid back for one day. House Bill 117, read it in.
House Bill 117 engrossed, occupational therapy licensure compact, sponsored by Representative Kinner, an act relating to professions and occupations.
Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. President. I
Oh,
too.
let's do this. We have an amendment. You read in the amendment too, right?
House Bill 117, third reading amendment number 1 to engrossed copy, page 60, line 8, delete.
Now move it, Senator Pappas.
Mr. President, I wish not to move it. I wish also to, absent objection, lay it back one day. We have a technical correction to that amendment.
To the amendment. The amendment is being laid back one day and the bill. Correct?
Well, yeah,
Let's see.
correct. I mean, they're both the same.
Yeah. Third reading on the bill. We can lay the amendment back for a little bit.
I was asked by our attorneys just to have it laid back one day, so.
Okay, one day.
One day.
Okay, absent objection.
Thank you.
Amendment Bill 117 laid back one day. Cuts our workload down. Today it does. Okay. Well, Mr. Majority Floor Leader takes care of the thirds, and we are quarter two. How do you want to do this, sir? Oh, Senator Nethercott, have you got privilege?
Privilege of the floor, Mr. President, if I can.
Please do.
Good senators, we have with us here to the left of me in the upper chamber, the one and only Laramie County Commissioner Gunnar Malm, who serves our county with distinction. A warm Senate welcome for Commissioner Malm.
Commissioner, welcome to the Senate. Thank you. Any other privileges? No others. So Senator Driscoll, I guess folks standing. Senator Driscoll, what do you want to do is move into the lunch hour here? Mr. Floor Leader.
President, I'm going to do one bill before lunch. We got a couple of them that require some debate. So, Mr. President, I move we resolve ourselves into committee of the whole.
Okay, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Senator McEwen, you're in the chair.
Okay. And we got 3 amendments? I think I don't. Committee of the whole will come to order. Thank you. First bill for our consideration is House Bill 29. The reading clerk will read the bill, please. If I give it to him.
House Bill 29, Hathaway Scholarship Amendments, sponsored by the Education Committee, an act relating to Hathaway Scholarship Program, was referred to Committee Number 4, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Beitman, Ellis, Rothfuss, Salazar, and Scott. Senator Scott, Chairman. It was re-referred to Committee Number 2, Appropriations, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass, failed, amended. Ayes, Senator Guru. Noes, Senators Kinski, Perkins, and Steinmetz. Excused, Senator Hicks. Senator Perkins, Chairman.
You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure? Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, moving the Committee of the Whole rise and report it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 29 do pass. Mr. Chairman, this bill is an important part of the interim work of the Joint Education Committee. The motivation for it and the problem we were trying to deal with is that, and it deals with the Hathaway Scholarship, that we have had a marked decline since the Hathaway was implemented in the amount of the college expenses that the Hathaway is covering. When it started out, and we'll take the Honors Scholarship as an example, the Hathaway Scholarship covered 91%, and the Honors Scholarship of the University of Wyoming tuition and the other fees, and now it's covering about 50%. So we're really eroding the value of the scholarship. And Mr. Chairman, let me point out to the Senate, we investigated a few years after the Hathaway passed what it was actually doing. And we found that there were two principal effects. One was it was enabling a number of students who had to stop at the community college level to go on to finish their bachelor's degree, go to the University of Wyoming. And second, it was then enabling another group of students who'd had to stop at the high school level to go on to community college. So it was really quite successful in helping the students in the state of Wyoming, and really the average students in the state of Wyoming, in going on and getting the kind of higher education that they really needed. And so we were concerned about the erosion of the amount of the costs that were being paid, because there has been inflation in higher education. We have not been as bad perhaps as the rest of the country. University of Wyoming's probably the best deal there is amongst the land grant colleges, but it is still, the tuition has had to go up. There's been some real inflation in the society. So we were trying to deal with that. The bill itself deals with it. I was disappointed, frankly, in what we found we could do under the current system to improve things. It's a little less than 6% average increase in the tuition as the bill stands before you right now. We get rid, there are two accounts. There's an expenditure account and reserve account. We were shuffling monies back and forth. That's inefficient when we shuffle them between those. And the shuffling meant they couldn't be invested quite as long term and cut down the revenues available just a little. So the bill consolidates those. It does a few other things, try to improve the efficiency. Mr. Chairman, when we had a very good committee meeting on this bill, and the result is a standing committee amendment from Committee 4 that I ask be read in at this time.
House Bill 29, Standing Committee Amendment to Number 1, page 6, line 11, delete.
Mr. Chairman, move adoption of the Standing Committee Amendment. Mr. Chairman, as we discussed how the flow of funds works and what the constraints are, what we discovered was that we come fairly close to meeting all the needs with the interest and dividends off the endowment. And those are pretty stable and pretty predictable, Mr. Chairman. What's unpredictable is the amount of capital gains income we get off the endowment. And we said, okay, if we wanted to start making up and significantly reducing this inability to keep up with the inflation in higher education. What could we do? And consulting with the experts from the LSO staff and from the state treasurer's office, who were very helpful, we discovered that if we were to add 3.5 million a year, we could have a 20% increase in the value of these scholarships without having to spend any long-term gain that we were getting. So what we did was we said, okay, if we can go 4 years without having any long-term gains. In some years, we don't get them. There've been, since it was created, there've been 2 years where we didn't get it. If we could go 4 years, we could safely increase the scholarship amounts by 20%. And that's what this amendment does, Mr. Chairman. It increases the scholarship amounts right through the different varieties of the Hathaway Scholarship by 20%. It appropriates to the now single account, the expenditure account. I say appropriates, the technical word is transfers. That's an important technicality, but we're taking it from the LISRA, so you might think of it in the same terms as an appropriation. But we take that money, add that to this expenditure account, and we can, with that one-time addition, safely go 4 years, and that gives us, I think, a good safety margin. We'll get some long-term capital gains, build things up in that period. And that enables us to close half the gap we have. I would love to come back. The Hathaway endowment is now a little, and of course it fluctuates with the market. It's a little under 700 million right now. I'd like to come back and increase that at some point in the future. I think we're going to need to. But we can get half our problem solved with a smaller appropriation. That's what the Standing Committee amendment does. It also stops a tip that was going to occur under the current system at the end of the current fiscal year, about $1 million. So we stop that and leave that in the expenditure account. That gives us a little extra margin, so a little safety margin. Mr. Chairman, I think it's long past time that we did something major about our Hathaway Scholarship. It is eroding way too far. This is a way we can do it. We do take money that would otherwise go into the LISRA account, where it would be spent in due course of time. That's our current general fund, the way it's evolved. And this does save some so that we can have it for the next 4 years and enable this increase. So, Mr. Chairman, that's the Standing Committee amendment from the Education Committee. I urge its adoption.
Senator Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Point of privilege. I want to apologize about interrupting this because it's normally not done, but we're full of young kids here and they have to leave. And I just wanted to recognize them. These kids are part of a Christian organization called Team Pact, and they are here once a year to learn local government, to learn about the Senate and the House of Representatives and how it all works. And they're really an extraordinary group of people. So if you could welcome them, I'd appreciate it.
Senator Wasserberger.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of this amendment. And really, the issue on the Hathaway Scholarship is exactly that. We have, over the years, I think maybe twice, slightly increased the Hathaway. And it never, ever kept pace with inflation. And so here's an opportunity to increase the Hathaway. It's not going to get us to where we were when we started this in 2007, 15 years ago, but it is going to help us keep pace to a certain extent. And I would urge the body to think carefully. Spending $14 million here today would be, I think, an incredible way to use some of the dollars that we have received. I urge you to vote aye and to support this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and against the amendment. Mr. Chairman, just a little bit of history on the funding of the Hathaway Scholarship Fund. This was created back in a time of plenty, recognizing that we would not be able to be in those times forever. And so there was initially, with federal minimum royalties, there was a creation where, as federal minimum royalties came in, when times were very good, we diverted it within a year and a half, about $400 million into this fund to start it. Then later, the legislature actually appropriated another $50 million from a co-lease bonus sale back when there were such things into this, to put it at $450 million. Since then, there has been $150 million of tips by managing and doing these things wisely, managing the investments wisely. And that tip, when the reserve fund gets to a certain level, then it tips over and adds to the corpus. And over time, we've gone, as you see, we've gone from the 450 to, depending on when the market is in any given day, right around $700 million. And what that's enabled us to do by leaving that where it was, it's gotten better. Now there hasn't been raises in Hathaway yet. What we look at and where we are currently, we could fund a 10% raise without having to do anything. I believe that that's about where we are. That's the income that's generated off of this. Even, and if we get any capital gains from time to time, it's more than adequately funded to give a 10% raise to this. Two things that have happened in the past that have limited why we've done is, one is inflation's obviously done it, but there is some correlation. I'm not saying there's a one-to-one or direct correlation, but there's been some correlation about when you raise the Hathaway, that all of a sudden the tuitions at the community colleges and the tuitions at the university tend to increase. There is some correlation, and so when we do this, we can find ourselves chasing our tails a little bit with respect to keeping up with Hathaway, because it does provide a very while an indirect, it provides a substantial source of income both to families and also to our higher education institutions. But what we can do is we could afford a 10% increase right now without adding the $14 million. So I think we should discuss that and do that. And that's not a 20% increase like this proposes, but I think the existing structure would support a 10% increase. And so I think that gives us an opportunity to move this bill forward and work it to where we can live within our existing means and provide a significant benefit for students attending higher institutions of higher learning in the state and do that. But for those reasons, I would ask you to consider, and vote no on this amendment. We'll continue to work the bill and see if we can and do one that lives within its means. This does affect the LSRA. One of the things, it's a direct appropriation right from the LSRA. We are now on the most current profile. We're probably about $50 million lower with a lower LSRA than when we started this session. We're leaving here with still fit. That's better than it's improving as some bills don't make their way through. And some bills and some things in the budget, as the budget narrows, will probably help that a little bit as we narrow in the budget committee. But Our LSRA is still lower than we came in. And this is a direct appropriation out of that LSRA, when I think that we can do a raise or increase for this without necessarily increasing or making this distribution and pulling this amount from the LSRA. For those reasons, I would ask you to vote no on this particular amendment. Thank you.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm for the amendment, and contemplating what we can afford is a separate discussion from the $14 million. And I know that there's an amendment coming up from the Senate Standing Committee on Appropriations and SS2 that looks at specifically the $14 million. But the idea of how much we can afford is independent of that. A lot of the projections we contemplate are based on a 2.1% yield based on a number of years for the Hathaway, where we use that as the baseline, and we've used that traditionally in the past to determine affordability. And so we've been relatively conservative with providing any additional allocations because we're always focusing on the 2.1%. What your education committee did was take a look at, all right, well, what's actually a reasonable return over a long period of time? And one of the things that wasn't addressed yet is that this bill tries to provide a more stable approach to availability of funds over a long period of time. So rather than looking at a single year and ensuring that there's sufficient revenue available, it now looks and provides availability for about a 7-year timeline. And we can talk about that after we're done with this amendment. But the concept is leveling the availability of funds and then thinking what's a reasonable spending policy. With this 20% increase, we don't even need a 3.5% spending policy for the 5-year average of the Hathaway. We asked the LSO to calculate that, provide that to us. Are we still staying below a 3.5% yield? And yes, we are. We're at 20% increase. We're still below a 3.5% spending policy. All of the other accounts, everything else we do in this body assumes a 4 to 5% spending policy, except the Hathaway. The Hathaway does not make that assumption. 3% of $700 million is $21 million. If we had spent $21 million, we would have probably hit right around 20% increase right now. That's rational. There's nothing irresponsible about increasing by 20% at this point in time, because again, it assumes less than a 3.5% spending policy. Getting to about a 50%, somewhere in that ballpark, that becomes fully irresponsible if we were increasing it by that much. But 20% was contemplated by your education committee with a very conservative spending policy of less than 3.5%, and that's why the recommendation comes. Mr. Chairman, I would urge the body to support this amendment and recognize that an increase to the Hathaway is long overdue. To address one other concern, which is a very reasonable concern, and it comes to the correlation between the increases in tuition versus the increases in Hathaway. This chamber has long assumed that when we increase Hathaway, tuition increases. With the university and with the colleges, both have published already what their tuition increases are going to be for a number of years into the future based on inflation. And we're always offended that they do that, but inflation is a thing. We know that. What we don't do is automatically inflate the Hathaway to keep up with inflation. So every year that we don't increase Hathaway by 2 to 4%, we know that we're eroding Hathaway further, which is why we've arrived at a point where the Hathaway barely covers, even at the honors level, 50% tuition fees. Mr. Chairman, we need to start bridging that gap. The intent was to try covering most of, I think Senator Kinski's out there somewhere, maybe listening. To cover most of tuition and fees at that honors level. And I think it's something for us to aspire to. This is a modest step towards it. I'd appreciate the body's favorable consideration on the Standing Committee amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would encourage everybody that the handout that you just received is to turn to the back page. And, Mr. Chairman, you know, on the CAP-FIN, we look at all these investments in the Capital Finance Committee, and periodically we get actuarially reports on all the funds, the Higher Education Endowment Fund, our permanent funds, our school land funds, Hathaway scholarship funds. And while we haven't done that for a couple of years, 3 years ago when we looked at that, looking out at the 30-year projection at the current rate, we were about 50% chance that we were going to have enough money and 50% chance we weren't. But what I want to draw your attention to on the back page is to see what happens when we start increasing that. So we know that potential investment earnings based on all of the advice that we've been going forward on all of our permanent funds is probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 5%, depending on the restrictions we put on there. So when you look at that and you look at our projected revenues, that's only going out to 2026. And they're projected. But look what happens when we jump to 5 and then 10 and then 15 and then 20. We don't have to get out very far and all of a sudden those lines cross, Mr. Chairman. And when that happens, then we're going to have to start putting general fund money in there or decreasing those scholarships. The point that I'm trying to drive home, Mr. Chairman, we increase it now. 3 years ago, we had a 50-50 chance at the current level that it was actuarially sound. You're changing the trajectory of the distributions to the point that sometime in the near future, you're liable to not have enough money to pay at this current level. So I would encourage you to defeat the amendment, and let's be fiscally responsible and look at the 30-year life expectancy and just what the immediate return is right now, looking out to 2026. Those things are going to converge, Mr. Chairman, and that graph illustrates that perfectly. So on and against the amendment.
Senator Wasserberg.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick response to the Chairman of Appropriations. Having been here during those years, when we first started the Hathaway Scholarship, there was a huge movement to inflation-proof the Hathaway. And yes, we put $150 million into that fund. But at that time, we had $1 billion surplus. We were looking for places to put money. And that was a great place to put money. At the same time, we did not increase the Hathaway Scholarship. So I would urge you to support this amendment and help the students out if you can. Thank you.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, there's a balance to be struck here. We have to stay fiscally sound. We need to do that. We have a program here that has been very successful for the children of the state, for our young adults, for our future. It has enabled many Wyoming high school graduates who would otherwise not go to college get the training to provide the skilled workforce that we need, get the training that they need to succeed in the modern world. Been very helpful for the average kids in the state. We don't do enough for them. You've got a balance here. For the past 15 years, 10 years, whatever, however long you want to talk, we have been ultra conservative fiscally in this. We're saying let's be just a little less conservative. Let's put a little extra money in, and let's start to close the gap that is developed. And I keep hearing about they're gonna raise the tuition because we're paying more. No, they're gonna raise it because there's real inflation in society. Now, that's gonna, I think, eventually bring the interest rates up. That will help our income out of this endowment. But I think what we have to do is strike a balance. And we have too long been unbalanced and not kept up with the value of this, the inflation here, and eroded what this is doing for the young adults who make up the future of this state. And it's time to change that. I wish we could change it, not 20%, but bring it back another 20%. But we can't. Not without putting a lot more money in here than I think we're going to be able to afford. But 14 million we can afford, and we need it in this inflationary era in order to preserve the value of this program, which again, I point out, is one that really helps the average families and the average students in this state, and we don't do as much for them as we really ought to. So, for those reasons, Mr. Chairman, on and for the amendment.
Are you ready for the question? All those in favor of Senator Scott's motion to adopt Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 29, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Division. All those in favor, please rise. All those opposed, please rise. He's a no.
He's a no?
I think he's got his hand up. I'm not. Do I have to? I'm just going to leave it there.
Okay, so you're done.
The motion to adopt Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 29 has failed. We are back on the bill. The vote count was 12 yeses, 13 noes. Senator Perkins.
So are we ready to move on to Standing Committee Amendment 2 then?
House Bill 29, Standing Committee Amendment number 2, page 12, lines 17 through 22.
Mr. Chairman, with the action that was just taken in defeating the Standing Committee Amendment, we don't need the Standing Committee number 2, so I would move to withdraw Standing Committee Amendment number 2 at this time. Excuse me, I would ask to withdraw Standing Committee Amendment number 2.
Pending any absent objections, that has been pulled. What's that? Withdrawn by the sponsor. Back to the bill, please. We have one more? We have one more amendment.
House Bill 29, Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1, delete.
And that's been read. I would move Standing Committee, Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to House Bill 29 and ask the body to vote aye. This is a 10% raise. We believe this is fully fundable with the program under its existing conditions. We think it's appropriate, and so your sponsors here, which are the same people that are on the Senate Appropriations Committee, are sponsoring us individually. We couldn't do that in our standing committee, but we think in looking at this that the current funding, the current structure will be able, can allow us to move this up 10%. So what this does is a 10%. It's a 10% increase to the number. In addition, it does one other thing. So it increases scholarships by 10%. So it's half of what the standing committee number 1 did. In addition to that, there's a 4.5% reserve amount. This is in the reserve number, and that's what in the reserve account. Once it gets to 4.5, when it's over 4.5, then it tips back in and becomes part of the corpus. That's how you can continue to grow this fund and help to continue to move it forward so it can sustain these things moving forward. So it takes that reserve number, moves it back to the existing number of 4.5%. You see that on lines 6 through 8. And the rest of this is, as I've said, and actually I think that, and the rest of this is then a 10% increase. So that's the two things it does. It takes and keeps the reserve number at 4.5 where it is now, but does raise the scholarship benefit the 10%. Thank you.
Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to verify, when we worked on this bill in committee, one of the concerns we heard from the colleges and the university was making sure that any number that we use is divisible by 12. When you have a student who's taking fewer than 12 credit hours, they do a prorate that amount. And when we don't use even numbers that are divisible by 12, it creates penny problems and it's an administrative nightmare. So I think I already know the answer to it, but I also just kind of wanted to point that out to the body, but just wanted some affirmation from the bringer of the amendment that these are all divisible by 12. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Perkins.
Mr. Chairman, we cut that in half, so if it's divisible by 12, you would anticipate that it would also be divisible by 12, since it was basically cut the original amendment in half, so that's a drop by 50%. So that would normally tell you, and since these are in whole dollar amounts, I believe that the property of multiplication over division, distributed property multiplication over division would apply and would still be divisible by 12. But we can check that, and if not, we can fix it on a subsequent amendment.
Chairman Scott.
Mr. Chairman, and if it isn't, there is a thing called 50 cents.
Are you ready for the question? Never mind. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and my apologies, I didn't see this amendment, and so I hadn't been able to work through a division, but the concept, as I just heard it explained, was an understanding that the 9% was dropped back to 4.5% as what is effectively a separate question. And I'm looking at the amendment trying to find that. I think that is only, now that I have it, lines 6 through 8 is the only relevant part of that discussion. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask that the amendment be divided without objection. And the division 1, I'm going to have be the discussion regarding the change to 10%. So that would be lines 9 through 44 and line 1 through 5. And then the entirety of the second page, we'll call that division 1. So lines 1 through 5, 9 through 44, and then page 2, lines 1 through 18. And then division 2 would be lines 6 through 8. And I guess you could bring along 1 through 5 in both of those, but I don't know that you actually need it. So I believe that's the appropriate division. I'd actually defer to the good senator that's the chairman to make sure that I'm not messing that up, since I only just now saw this amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe so. I was looking at that, wanted to make this divisible for that very purpose. And so I think that's the accurate division. I think 1 through 5 doesn't matter because that was the original standing committee amendment number 1 was defeated. So I don't think 1 through 5 matters in either case.
It is divisible on a Division 1.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On Division 1, vote aye.
Are you ready for the question? Those in favor of Senator Rothfuss' motion to adopt? No. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor of Senator Perkins' motion to adopt Division 1 of the Standing Committee of the Whole Amendment to House Bill 29, please say aye. Aye. Okay. All those in favor of Senator Perkins' motion to adopt the Committee of the Whole, Division 1, Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to House Bill 29, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion to adopt Division 1, Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to House Bill 29 has passed. Division 2, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and against Division 2, and Division 2 is actually the heart of the bill, despite being able to be wiped out by 2 lines, which is kind of interesting. The discussion that led to this during the interim was the idea that was twofold. One was, we know that we have inconsistent capital gains, and we know that we have a relatively small reserve account, such that on some occasions, when capital gains aren't realized on an annual basis, but the Hathaway has to be provided on an annual basis, there are actually cash flow concerns with the Hathaway with regard to the reserve account, or now it's the merger in this legislation of effectively a spending account and a reserve account into one, but you can think of it as that spending/reserve account. A concern that it could be cash tight and not have sufficient funds available to fully fund the Hathaway for that year. And we haven't run into that, but we've been actually fairly close. So the 4.5% concept is 3-ish years, 3.5 years of spending as the possibility. So the discussion in the interim on the Education Committee was, well, that's a little bit tight. You could run into a circumstance where you didn't have sufficient cash flow. You'll always get your 2.1% yield, but we might not get the 3.5% that we need to realize the entirety, just based on when that revenue is distributed. So there was a desire to increase from 4.5% to a higher number the size of that reserve account, and that's where the 9% comes from. But that's not the only part of the bill. The other desire was a recognition that we're wasting an opportunity cost on that reserve account because it's invested in the state agency pool. And so actually the objection that I had during the interim was it doesn't make sense for us to increase from 4.5% to 9% because all that would be doing is wasting an opportunity cost unless we provide an opportunity to invest those funds in Pool A, which is also what this bill does. So the 9% is not sitting in state agency pool at that point. The 9% is a cash flow fund to ensure that there is always sufficient funds available to meet the Hathaway needs, but it is invested as much as it can be in Pool A based on speculation of cash flow needs. The challenge is you need a reasonable amount of runway there to be able to anticipate cash flow needs without overly constraining yourself on the investment side. If we take it back to 4.5%, we end up with a circumstance where we actually don't have enough runway to intelligently invest those funds in a way that would get us the yield. So this is literally the heart of the bill. This is what it does. The 4.5% to 9% shifting from state agency pool to pool A so that we can have a strategy for that account and maintain cash flow. If you kill the 4.5%, probably just want to vote the bill down. Well, I guess we have the small increase, the modest increase to 10%. But honestly, that wasn't the purpose of the bill. That was something we talked about and realized we should do. The purpose of the bill is this 4.5% to 9% coupled with the pool A shift so that we could have an investment strategy associated with the reserve account that's associated with the Hathaway. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that was a good catch by the senator from Albany County. I'd urge you to vote no on Division 2.
Chairman Perkins.
Thank you. On and for Division 2, folks, when we talk about the investment earnings, and one of the reasons this account is different than many of the other permanent accounts that we have, but also one of the reasons why it has a lower kind of average rate of return than our other accounts is because these funds are invested differently. They have a higher income focus because of the narrow runway and the other things that have already been talked about. And because the purpose then is to provide these scholarship funds, and you need to have this regular source of funding. And so a very significant and favorable part of the bill is exactly as been represented to you, is moving this into Pool A, moving the reserve account into Pool A makes a big difference. The divider of the amendment is absolutely right. By moving the reserve account into Pool A, the opportunity cost is fairly nominal, probably less than 0.5% on the difference between that you get between the reserve account and the other account. But that's not the only thing this does. This also says that you're not going to have a tip. So when we talk about inflation proofing and how, going back to the history lesson on this one, the original investment in this was the two deposits of $450,000. All the rest, there's another $150,000 come because of tips of those. When that reserve account gets to 4.5%, and when the amount's over that 4.5%, it drops into the corpus, and that's how those $150 million of additional deposits have been made. When you raise this, in fact, this equal doubling of this does that, it means that those tips happen less often, and so it'll slow that down, and we will, this is the thing. Do you spend it now, or do you keep letting this go over to the future so that it continues to build when we have these good investment years, and we have that. Recognizing that it's the good investment years are the opportunities for substantial gains in any investment year are reduced because these are invested with an income leaning profile. And so is 4.5% too small? Maybe. Is 9.5% too large? I think so. Maybe there's a Goldilocks solution in here that we can do with a little bit more preciseness or a little bit more thought than just let's double it because that'll give us this amount in half a year. I think we can do an analysis on that, and maybe we can find a Goldilocks solution. But right now, simply doubling it when you come down, two things, and the other 2 points are, one, as we all know, inflation's going, interest rates have to be on a rise, so we're more likely to, at least for the next little while, be able to deal with the downturns in the market because we're going to be collecting higher interest rates on fixed incomes, of which this one has a particular bent. This particular profile, this particular program has a more particular bent in that regard. So I think we're insulated there. The other thing is this legislature, we always look at these things. We always look at our cap fin and appropriations, education. We look at these tips every year. As necessary, we can take action in any given year to make sure that those are intercepted from tipping or something like that if we see a crisis coming. So my recommendation would be we would vote this division up, that we vote aye on this division. I'm more than happy to look at that with the sponsors of the bill and see if I'm wrong. I'll be happy to come back and say I'm wrong. But I think that just saying, let's double it because that'll be safer, it has more ramifications than that in the future in a significant way. So those reasons I'd ask you to vote aye on this division.
Chairman Scott.
Mr. Chairman, several points. One, there's another source of the increase in this fund that is not deposits or the tips, and that is that the general level of the investments have been going up where they're held in equity. That's probably more, I suspect, more important than the tips in terms of getting this thing inflation-proof and making it grow. Second, you have to get to a certain level before the treasurer's office says it's worth putting it in Pool A. And I think when we investigate, we will find that at the 4.5% level, none of this will go to Pool A investment because they'll think it's going to be too small and too needed for immediate expenditure. So for those reasons, I think we're better off without this division of the amendment.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to clarify one thing that I think is important. As you think about the size of the reserve accounts, remember, it's not the frequency of the tips that really changes. It's when that first tip happens, assuming that you're filling it up and you're moving upwards. So it's like a glass, and you're changing the volume of that glass. As you pour more volume into it, at what point does it overflow? This is doubling the volume of your reserve account glass from 4.5 to 9. Once you've filled it up, assuming that you're still in a positive investment yield, positive return timeline, you're still tipping just exactly the same amount. So you're delaying the tip because once it goes into the corpus, it is now inaccessible. If you're concerned about cash flow, this is essential. And that 0.5%, I agree with the good chairman of Cap and Appropriations, that there is going to be a 0.5% differential on whatever you transition there. So you'd never want 100% of it in. That would be a significant, obviously, change in yield. But from going to 4.5% to 9% of 700 million and then taking 0.5% of that as the differential, we're talking about 150K. That's not a really significant amount probably at the end of all of this, but it does provide cash flow, which might be important depending on the timeline and the lag between when those returns are yield or when you have down years and the frequency of those down years, where we've been fortunate not to have a long spate of down years in a row. But if you have a significant number of down years in a row, Mr. Chairman, then you'd struggle with only 4.5%. But I do look forward to, if this passes, then I appreciate the opportunity to work with the good proponent of it to look at an alternative solution. But at the same time, I think 9%, which we discussed during the interim, would still be a number that I would currently support. And I hope the body will as well by rejecting this second division and voting no. Thank you.
Are you ready for the question? All those in favor of Senator Perkins' motion to adopt Division 2 of Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 29, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. All those in favor, please rise. Sixteen ayes. All opposed, please rise. Ten nays. The motion to adopt Division 2, Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 29 has passed. We are back on the bill. All those in favor, of Senator Scott's motion to adopt. Is that on here? Those in favor of Senator Scott's motion that when Committee of the Whole rises to report that it do so with a favorable recommendation of House Bill 29, say aye. Aye. Opposed? House Bill 29 has passed Committee of the Whole, and there is not a next bill for our consideration.
You'll get the hang of it. Mr. Chairman, move the Committee of Whole, beg leave to rise and sit again.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Lunchtime.
That passes.
Call for it. Did he? Okay. Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are we doing announcements? I just want to make
Just a
sure.
minute, let me, okay, you've heard, yeah. Mr. Driscoll, or Senator Driscoll, go ahead and,
Mr. President, I move we stand recessed until 2:30 p.m.
thank you. Now announcements, Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just received a note from the Wyoming Department of Education. They have a group, their Level Up Leadership Cohort, which is made up of district teachers, principals, and presidential award winners in excellence in math and science. They're hosting a lunch in the Capitol Extension, and they said all of us are welcome. And if you have a meeting during the lunch hour, you're welcome to grab a quick bite and then head on your way.
Explain this, who this group is again, please?
Yeah, Mr. President, this is the Level Up Leadership.
Level Up Leadership, okay. Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, has a noon recess meeting. We have some people waiting for us. We need to get down there as soon as we can get out of here, grab a lunch, but we need to get down there to do hearings confirmation hearing on the Mental Health Licensing Board, and early announcements Monday morning at 8 a.m. We'll meet in room 6 to continue House Bill 92, abortion prohibition Supreme Court decision.
Thank you. Let's go over to Senator Anderson. Go
Mr.
ahead.
President, your Minerals Committee will meet today upon noon recess at 1 o'clock in room W004 and online to hear House Bill 105 severance tax reduction coal and House Bill 131 engrossed nuclear power generation and storage amendments. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go over to Senator Landon while they're sorting that out. Go ahead, Senator Landon.
Mr. President, your Transportation Committee will meet, let's make it 1:15, Committee, 1:15 this afternoon in W2 to take up House Bill 64 engrossed vehicle service contracts and House Bill 44 mobile home and vehicle titles and transfers, 1:15 this afternoon.
Thank you. I think Chairman Perkins, ready? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee number 2 appropriations will meet upon noon recess. So we'll call that about 5 minutes of. If we can get our lunch and then get up there, give us a chance to swallow that. Maybe we can even chew it before we swallow, Mr. President.
Okay.
We're going to meet in the joint appropriation room 301 and online to take up House Bill 91 engrossed county officer salaries, House Bill 96 engrossed state official salary, House Bill 146 engrossed general government reports, House Bill 53 engrossed on re-referral, military department discrimination of harassment grievances.
Further announcements, heard the motion. Senate will stand recessed until 2:30.